In a valley forgotten by the frantic pace of the world, a place where asphalt roads surrendered to gravel and houses still held the stories of generations, lived an old potter named Samuel. His small home and workshop, nestled at the foot of a lush green hill, seemed to have sprouted from the earth itself. Samuel was a man whose conversations were with the clay, and whose thoughts ran as deep and silent as the creek that cut through his property. At his side was Leo, his 18-year-old grandson, a young man shaped by his grandfather's love, yet who felt the pull of a world that existed beyond that valley. Across the valley, bathed in the golden morning light, there is the Samuel's rustic workshop. We see Samuel from behind, his hands deep in clay, moving with a hypnotic and precise slowness. Leo is in the background, sweeping the floor with quick, energetic movements, his eyes often drifting toward the distant road. The heart of their life and their art, however, wasn't the clay itself, but what gave it life, the spring. A small stream of water that bubbled up, crystal clear from the rocks at the back of their property. It was more than H2O, it was the family secret, the soul of every piece they created. The water had a purity that resulted in pottery of unmatched strength and color. For Samuel, drinking from that spring each morning was an act of communion, a daily reminder of life's generosity. For Leo, it was simply the best water he had ever tasted.
The water bubbling gently over smooth stones. Leo kneels, fills a jug, and drinks directly from the running water, closing his eyes in satisfaction. The peace of that routine was shattered by the sound of tires on gravel. A modern, gleaming sedan, looking like a displaced animal in the rustic landscape, pulled up in front of the workshop, kicking up a cloud of dust. From it stepped Silas, the most successful entrepreneur in the region, a man whose smile was as polished as his expensive shoes. His eyes scanned the property, not seeing the beauty of its simplicity, but the untapped potential of every square foot. "Samuel, my friend, hope I'm not interrupting. I was passing through and couldn't help but admire the tranquility of this place. But I see more than tranquility. I see opportunity. An opportunity for you and for the boy." Leo stopped working, his heart quickening. Silas represented everything he secretly desired: success, recognition, a life without the constant worry about money. He watched, fascinated, as Silas approached, exuding confidence. "I'll be direct. I want to buy the rights to your spring. This water is a miracle of nature. I'm going to build a small modern bottling facility nearby. Nothing too invasive. I'll call it Samuel's Creek or something, in your honor. Think about it. Jobs for the town, our little valley on the map. And for you," he pauses dramatically, "I'll pay a sum that will ensure that neither your grandson nor your great-grandsons will ever have to work a single day in their lives." The numbers Silas then whispered were enough to take Leo's breath away. It was more money than he could possibly imagine. It was the solution for the leaky roof, for the worn-out tools, for the uncertain future. He looked at his grandfather, his eyes pleading with him to accept, to finally say yes to the good fortune knocking at their door. Samuel, however, simply wiped his clay-caked hands on his apron, his calm gaze meeting Silas's without wavering. "Your offer is generous, Silas, and I appreciate your vision. But this water holds a memory that money can't buy. It quenched the thirst of my father, and his father before him. It's woven into every piece that has ever left this workshop. Some things in life aren't ours to sell. They are ours to protect. The spring stays." Silas kept his smile, but his eyes hardened. He let out a short laugh, as if Samuel had told a naive joke. As you wish, Samuel. But the future doesn't wait for the sentimental. You'll regret choosing memories over progress. Silas turns, gets in his car, and drives away, leaving behind a heavy silence and the smell of dust. In the town, over the following days, Samuel's decision became the main topic of gossip. Leo is at the local general store. He overhears the hushed conversations of the other customers. "Did you hear about old Samuel? Turned down Silas's offer. Crazy! Sitting on a gold mine and choosing to live in poverty. Poor kid, that Leo, stuck with a stubborn old man who's throwing away his future." That night, the dam of Leo's frustration finally broke. He walked into the workshop where Samuel was polishing a pot by lantern light. "They're laughing at us in town, Grandpa, calling you a fool and me the one who stuck with him. How could you do that? That was our way out, an end to the worrying, an end to counting every penny. I love this place, but I want to live, not just survive. Did you even think about me?" Samuel stops polishing and turns slowly to his grandson. On his face there is no anger, but only a deep compassion. He places his heavy, clay-stained hand on Leo's shoulder. "I am always thinking of you, Leo. That's why I said no. You're seeing the now, the hardship, the frustration. You're reading the first page of a chapter and thinking it's the whole story. But life is a long book, and the most difficult chapters often prepare us for the most beautiful parts. Don't be so quick to call an event a blessing or a curse. A seed's purpose isn't seen when it's planted in the dark earth, but only when it becomes a tree. Give it time."
Leo looks away, his grandfather's words sounding like a riddle he has no patience to solve. The camera focuses on Samuel's face, lit by the lantern's flame, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon, as if he could already read the chapters yet to come. The weeks that followed Samuel's refusal were heavy with an uneasy quiet. The town's contempt wasn't spoken aloud, but Leo felt it in every averted gaze at the market, in every conversation that stopped when he approached. He worked with a silent fury, his frustration mixing with the clay beneath his fingers. And then, what had been a test of faith turned into what seemed to be a punishment from fate. One morning, the flow from the spring was weaker. The next, the water came out murky. On the third morning, fetching water, Leo felt the bucket was too light. He knelt and saw the unthinkable. The spring, the beating heart of their lives, had dwindled to a damp trickle, a muddy whisper. On the fourth day, it was completely dry. Shot of the empty spring bed, now just a patch of cracked mud with a single dead leaf in the center, and the desperation on Leo's face. Narrator. Panic seized Leo like a fever. Without the pure water, the local clay was nearly useless. Its consistency changed, the colors turned dull, and worse, the pieces cracked in the unrelenting heat of the kiln. The work of their lives was turning to dust and shards. Leo, voice trembling, mixed with anger, confronting Samuel in the silent workshop. "Now what, Grandpa? What has your patience brought us? The land has abandoned us. Silas was offering us a fortune, a new life, and you refused it for some sentiment that is now turned into dry mud. Look around us. We're ruined. Everyone in town was right." Samuel looked at the shelf of cracked, imperfect pots. He felt his grandson's pain, the sting of fear, but underneath, his faith remained like the bedrock beneath the soil. He took a shovel and a broom and walked to the dry spring, beginning to clear away the mud and stones with slow, deliberate movements. "The earth owes us nothing, Leo. It gives and it takes away. Our job now is not to curse the drought, but to learn to dance in the dust. The book isn't finished yet. Leo, frustrated by his grandfather's calm, kicks a bucket of dry clay and storms out of the workshop. In town, Silas sees him and approaches with a smile of false compassion. "Heard about your bad luck, son. A real shame. If only your grandfather had an eye for business." "Well, the offer is off the table, of course. No one would buy a dry piece of land. But I did try to warn you." Silas's words were like salt in Leo's open wound. The scorn of the skeptics now seemed like the gospel truth. But Samuel, tireless, spent his days clearing the dry spring bed, as if preparing the way for a king who might never arrive. And it was in this act of stubborn faith that life revealed its next chapter. Beneath the deepest layer of mud, Samuel's shovel struck something different. It wasn't rock. It was a thick, oily layer of clay, a deep crimson hue, almost like dried blood, with veins of cobalt blue he had never seen before. Samuel's hands digging and revealing the vibrant, colorful clay, his eyes widened slightly with a glint of awe. He took a lump back to the workshop. When he moistened it with the little water they had stored, it came alive in his hands, supple and rich. The piece he molded not only survived the kiln, but emerged transformed. The colors had deepened into a magnificent, almost living pattern. It was by far the most extraordinary piece of pottery he had ever created. Leo returns to the workshop, dejected, and stops short upon seeing the stunning vessel on the table. He touches it with reverence, his eyes shifting from disbelief to euphoria. "Grandpa, what is this? Where did it come from?" "From where the water used to be. The loss forced us to dig deeper." Euphoria took hold of Leo. Ruin had turned into treasure. This rare clay was worth far more than the water. They weren't just saved, they were rich. The news spread, and envy replaced the scorn in town. Silas returned, this time with an even bigger offer, to buy the mining rights to the clay. Leo was ready to accept, to finally taste victory, but to his utter bewilderment, Samuel refused again. "This clay is not to be sold by the pound, Leo. It is to be transformed by our hands. It is a gift for our art, not for our wallet." And then, at the height of this newfound blessing, the cruelest trial of all befell them. High on excitement and a bit careless in his rush to create more pieces, Leo was working the potter's wheel at high speed. The new clay, being denser, required more force. His hand slipped, a moment of inattention, and the metal tool he was using to shape the piece was violently pulled in, cutting deep into his right hand, his potter's hand. The potter's wheel is stained with blood. Leo is clutching his hand, his face twisted in pain and shock. The camera focuses on the deep wound, an injury that would clearly affect his tendons. The injury was severe. The town doctor did what he could, but he was clear. Leo's hand would never again have the same steadiness, the same precision. His career as a potter, his future, his dream, all of it dissolved in that instant. This wasn't a setback, it was an end. Leo sits in the darkness of the workshop, his bandaged hand useless in his lap. Silent tears stream down his face. He looks at his grandfather, his eyes filled with a pain that went beyond the physical. Leo's voice broken, a whisper of despair. "You and your book. Look at the end of this chapter, Grandpa. The spring dried up to give us a clay that stole my hands. It was a bait, a trap. The blessing was the real curse. There's no purpose in this, only cruelty." This was the lowest point. Leo's faith shattered like a flawed pot. The skeptics this time didn't mock. They just shook their heads with grim pity, confirming to themselves that Samuel's property was indeed cursed. And in the midst of this darkness, when hope seemed like a distant memory, the mountain itself began to tremble. Hey, you're feeling the weight of this story, right? If so, if you've ever felt like Leo, lost in the middle of a painful chapter, write the phrase, "Everything in life has a purpose," in the comments. That way, I'll know you're connected with me on this journey. And listen, 85% of the people who watch these stories are not yet subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, I humbly invite you to subscribe now. It's free, and you help me continue to bring more stories that remind us to look beyond the pain of the moment. The tremor was followed by a deafening roar. On the other side of the mountain, a torrential rain had saturated the earth, triggering a massive landslide. A wall of mud, rock, and uprooted trees tore down the slope, burying everything in its path and crashing directly into the river that was the main water source for the entire town. It was a chaotic and fast-moving scene. Trees were breaking, and the river water turned into a thick, brown torrent of mud and debris. Residents ran in terror. The disaster was on an unimaginable scale. The river, the town's lifeblood, was dead, contaminated for decades, perhaps forever. But on Samuel's land, something miraculous happened. The geological pressure from the landslide, the very event that destroyed the river, had released whatever was blocking the underground aquifer. And from the dry spring, a trickle of clean water began to emerge. Then a flow, and within hours, Samuel's spring was gushing stronger and purer than ever before. His temporary loss is what saved him from the permanent contamination that afflicted everyone else. His small spring was now the only source of clean drinking water in the entire region. And Leo, with his bandaged right hand, was safe inside the house beside his grandfather, not working down by the river or somewhere else dangerous, as he might have been if not for his injury. His curse had ensured his survival. The morning after the landslide dawned under a strangely clear and silent sky. The mountain's roar had ceased, leaving behind a transformed landscape and a heartbroken town. The river, once the proud artery of the valley, was now a clogged vein of mud and death. Wealth, commerce, plans for the future, all of it had been washed away in the debris flow. There was only a collective thirst and the fear of what was to come. And then, like pilgrims searching for a miracle, they began to arrive. A small line of townspeople, including Silas, his expensive clothes now caked in mud, walked slowly up the path to Samuel's property. They carry empty buckets and jugs. Their faces show no scorn or envy, only exhaustion and a newfound humility. They stopped at a respectful distance, staring at the pure water gushing from Samuel's spring, an oasis of life amidst the devastation. Silas, the man who wanted to bottle and sell that water, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Silas, we were wrong. We mocked your faith in things we couldn't see. And now, your spring is all we have left. We didn't come to beg, just to understand. You weren't a fool. You were wise." Samuel, who had been sitting on the porch with Leo, simply nodded. There was no triumph in his eyes, only a deep compassion. He stood, took a jug, and filled it with the crystal clear water, offering it to Silas. "The earth tests us all, Silas, and thirst doesn't distinguish between the rich and the poor. Drink, there is enough for everyone." The townspeople quietly fill their containers, a solemn act of gratitude. Leo watches it all, his bandaged hand throbbing gently, not with pain, but as a constant reminder. That evening, as the sun painted the wounded sky with colors of orange and purple, Leo and Samuel sat together, looking out over the valley. The silence between them was no longer one of tension, but of shared understanding. It was Leo who broke it. "If you had sold the spring, we would have had Silas's money, but we'd be just as thirsty as he is today. If the spring hadn't dried up, we never would have found that clay. And this hand? I cursed it so much, Grandpa. It felt like the end of my world." Leo's face is contorted, his eyes welling with tears of gratitude, not sorrow. He looks at his grandfather. But if it wasn't for this pain, if I wasn't stuck here at home feeling sorry for myself, I would have been down there, near the river, when the mountain came down. I wouldn't be here right now. The thing I called my greatest curse, it's what saved my life. I understand now, Grandpa. I finally understand what you meant. Samuel put his arm around his grandson's shoulders, a gesture of love and pride. Leo was no longer just a potter's apprentice. He had become an apprentice of life. He could finally read the pages of the book. Never curse the darkness of a chapter, Leo. Sometimes the darkness is necessary, just so we can see the brilliance of the stars in the next. I'm glad you made it to the end of this journey. The story of Samuel and Leo is a reminder that life often works in mysterious ways. The losses, the pains, the detours, they can be the unseen hand of purpose, guiding us toward our true salvation. If this story left a lesson in your heart, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories that help us change the way we see our lives. Thank you for your time. We'll see you in the next video.